Hi guys, I'm Anna Marie and welcome to my very first Booktube video. I'm so happy to be here. I have been a Booktube watcher for about a year now, very consistently, daily, even when I shouldn't. But I just love the community here and I love the idea that people can come together and talk about their love for books, because maybe they don't have people outside of the internet that love to talk about books the way that we do. And I don't really have that. Not a lot of people in my family like to read like I do, and as you can see, I like it a lot. I wanted to just come on here and make a lot of bookish friends and talk about what I love, and hopefully find some people who share my interests and want to talk about books with me. So I'm excited. Like I said, I am Anna Marie and welcome to Tropes and Tea with me. I'm an English teacher. It had to rhyme. Sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm a Southern girl. I was raised by a slew of Southern belles and gentlemen, so sweet tea is literally the nectar of the gods for me. My first video, I wanted to do a wrap-up. I'm the kind of Booktube watcher who loves watching TBR videos, and then at the end of the month seeing that Booktuber wrap up their month and discuss the books that they read and their thoughts on those books. So I figured I would start with a wrap up of January. To sum it up, I read 9 books. And just to give you an idea of what kind of genres I usually stick to, they were all fantasy. Every single one. I will venture into science fiction. Contemporary, not really my area. I'd like to start venturing out into contemporary sometime soon, but fantasy, sci-fi, that's my home. That's where I live. All right, let's get started. So my first book that I read in January was The Last Wish by Andrew Sapkowski. This is the first set of short stories in the Witcher series. The second one is The Sword of Destiny, and those 2 short story collections come before Blood of Elves, which obviously I haven't gotten to yet. So this is the first collection of short stories in the Witcher series, and I actually really enjoyed my time with this. There were times where I couldn't put it down, and I was so intrigued by like the characters and the creatures. A lot of this is wrapped up in mythology and folklore, especially the creatures. I took a folklore class in college, and so many of the stories and creatures that are in this book were in my myth and folklore class in college, and it was just so fun to go back to that. So you have Geralt, who is obviously a witcher, and he is kind of ostracized by society. They are not looked upon with respect, and they are actually thought of as inhuman, almost. A lot of people seem to think that they don't have human emotions. So it was interesting to follow a protagonist who is struggling with being persecuted for who he is and what he does, but within himself, he has human emotions, but he's trying to kind of quell those because of how society sees him. It's different. I liked it a lot. Also, his interactions with other characters are almost always hilarious. There's a lot of witty and sarcastic humor in here, and that's just my cup of tea. That's my cup of tea, guys. So I really liked Geralt's sense of humor. The stories, like I said, they're not in chronological order. So you'll have one story and then it'll cut you off in the middle of that story and just start another one, and you'll get a chapter of that. So it's kind of chaotic. The setup of this book is a little bit chaotic, but as you go, you see the timeline and you see kind of where he is in his development, and it makes a lot of sense. And his magic is very interesting. He can do a lot with his magic, and then sometimes it can't help him that much. There were a lot of really interesting retellings in here. We had a Beauty and the Beast retelling, a very twisted Snow White, and all within these retellings we had these moral and philosophical questions pop up that Geralt is asking himself, and we're seeing through the stories that we're reading. Also, another thing that I loved in here was the element of trickery. I am a huge fan of some tricksters and some riddles, and we did have those in here. And I did pick up Sword of Destiny, and I can't wait to get into that next, and then start with Blood of Elves, which is book 1, so can't wait. Next, started in November with a reread of Harry Potter. And actually, I have to give a shout out to Murphy Napier, because she was the reason that I wanted to do a Harry Potter rereading. It's been such a long time since I've done one, and she was doing one, and it's Murphy. So I was so excited to do that. And I started in November, which in January put me reading the HalfBlood Prince. The HalfBlood Prince is not one of my favorites, but it is definitely a good read. It has a good mixture of that like darker magic and history mixed in with the teenage angst and romance that I mean, it was a good mix. I liked it. I really liked getting to see Harry and Professor Dumbledore's relationship develop a little bit, especially after Order of the Phoenix, because that was kind of hard to see. And I know Harry wanted to trust Dumbledore so much, and this book just gave him a little bit of that trust back, you know? I always enjoy this one, even though it has a devastating ending. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this book was our insight into Malfoy's character. A lot of people you either hate Malfoy or I don't know if I could say love Malfoy, but Malfoy has my heart. Like he tugs at my heartstrings because I can see that there is more to him than we see in these books. There's so much pressure. He is put on such a pedestal by not only his family, but his friends. And there's so much expected of him, and he doesn't know how to live up to it. And he tries, but I don't think he wants that evil that people expect of him. Like he has such a softer side that we don't ever get to see. And I'm jealous of Moaning Myrtle because she gets to see it and we don't. But anyway, Malfoy is one of the most interesting characters, and I just have like fanfic of Malfoy in my head for years and years, trying to see other sides to him and like what is he going to be like in the future. So really enjoyed this read. And after that, of course, I picked up Deathly Hallows, and this one I feel like was a lot of action. Like even if there are some slow parts, there's still a lot going on, and I really enjoyed getting to see the history of Dumbledore and Grindelwald. You don't see that in the movies, and it's something that I just, like, I forgot about since my other reads. And I really liked getting to see that, and I liked getting to see Dumbledore's flaws and his ambition. And I liked him admitting that to Harry, and that shaping Harry's character as well. Dumbledore has always been the epitome of perfection and intelligence and morality for Harry. Like he's been his compass, and then Harry realizes that Dumbledore does have some flaws and can be selfish. I just think that really, you know, makes a mark on who Harry is and who he will be in the future. So that was really interesting. This is just a very bittersweet story toward the end. I'm always questioning the point of the epilogue, like the 19 years later. I don't really think I needed that. I wish that they had kind of left that out. I prefer books that leave the reader with the creative independence to finish the story on our own. I prefer when authors let their readers finish it out on their own so that the story can be different for everyone after the last page of the book. But you know, it was cute to see that all the characters we wanted to end up together did, and we saw their children. That was great. But anyway, it's Harry Potter. I love this. I will come back to it. I will read it to my kids one day. This is a really great read, and I'm happy I did it. So next in January, I actually finished a trilogy, the Winter Night trilogy, which includes The Bear and the Nightingale, The Girl in the Tower, and The Winter and the Witch. There are so many things I could say about this trilogy. In fact, I kind of want to do like a dedicated video just to reviewing this series because I loved it so much. So much. I was hesitant to get into this because I heard mixed reviews. I heard that it was kind of boring and not a lot happened, and the writing was flowery. And I mean, while I love beautiful lyrical writing, I do prefer a plot-driven story. So I was hesitant to get into this, but I finally did, and I'm so glad I did because yes, it does have somewhat flowery writing, but it's perfect for this time period and this story. And these characters, like it just fits so well. I mean, the writing was just beautiful. I felt like I was reading a lyrical poem the entire time. So in the Winter Night trilogy, we are following Vasilisa Petrovna in 12th to 14th century Russia. So we are following Vasya as she is growing up in her small town, and this small town is undergoing a huge transition from believing in this folklore magic and traditional natural magic, transitioning into this new religion and Christianity that does not allow for demonic practices, which is what some of the priests believe that this traditional magic does. So Vasya has the ability to see these magical creatures all around her. They're called cherti. And she sees these creatures and she's friends with them and they help her and she feeds them. She's got this relationship with this magic around her. And she can talk to horses. I mean, if anything makes you want to read a book, would it not be that she can talk to horses? That's all I need out of life, is to be able to talk to horses. She just has this relationship with the magic around her, and she's so pure and innocent in that, until a new religious leader comes to her town and starts to see that she has a relationship with this traditional demonic magic. And he starts to kind of influence his followers in this town to believe as he does, that this is demonic and unnatural, and people should be persecuted for believing in that. She has to go through a time where she is ostracized and no one believes her, and her only relationship is with this cherti. But eventually she finds a mentor, someone who can guide her through all of these differences that she has with the people around her, and that's all I'm gonna say. That's all you need. I mean, I could have just said she talks to horses and put the book down, but all that other stuff is true too. Also the setting, it's just winter in Russia, which I don't know if you've ever been there. I have not, but this kind of makes me want to go, and also makes me never want to go. A lot of people say that when reading this book, they can feel the cold and they can feel their fingers freezing. And I agree 100%. Some of the setting and the descriptions for this world, it was insane how real it felt. Like I was buried in the snow alongside Vasya as she was freezing to death. It was crazy. It was awesome. I loved it so much. So I read The Bear and the Nightingale, and then I moved on to The Girl in the Tower, which I can't say too much about because it is the sequel. Then finally, The Winter and the Witch. The ending was exactly what I needed, exactly what I wanted. I just want to read these every single winter forever of all my life. They were that good. I highly recommend this trilogy. It's wonderful. And then I finished up a trilogy, very well known, I'm sure, but I read The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, and this is the last book in the Mistborn trilogy. So I've been having so much fun reading Brandon Sanderson. I have just recently been introduced to him by a bunch of booktubers. I think the first booktuber that introduced me to the Mistborn trilogy was Peru's Project. Yeah, I think she was the first one to mention it. And I picked it up and I just devoured it. Like I loved it so much. And I think this was the first book that really got me interested in adult high fantasy, which is the majority of what I read now. And I just appreciate Brandon Sanderson getting me into that genre. So this conclusion was a wild ride. There was so much going on. So many characters went through these arcs and changes that just I wasn't expecting. So many pieces came together. And there were mysteries in this book and like puzzle pieces in this book that came up that I was not sure if I was ever going to understand what was going on. But in the end, he brought it together so perfectly. And it was one of those endings where you close the book and you're just like, that's it. That's the end. You're not wondering like, I mean, of course you wonder what happens next, but it's one of those things where you don't need more. Like, of course the Mistborn world is wonderful, but his ending closed the door on Mistborn Era 1, and it was perfect. The magic system is phenomenal. I mean, who else in the world hasn't said that? Because a ton of people have, but it's amazing. I really recommend. 2 left. My first is actually continuing a series, Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time series. This is book 2, which is The Great Hunt. I did finish The Great Hunt right in the middle of January. So I am on book 3 right now. Book 2 was interesting. I guess I should say book 1 I enjoyed so much. And I love The Lord of the Rings, and a lot of people know that Robert Jordan got a lot of his inspiration from The Lord of the Rings, which is fine. The entire fantasy genre gets its inspiration from Lord of the Rings. So I loved Eye of the World, book 1 of Wheel of Time. And I was expecting to love this one, and I loved parts of it. The beginning, like the first 100 pages or so, 200 pages, action-packed, exciting, just like intrigue. I loved it. And then it's like a plateau happened. It was a slow middle, very slow middle. It just didn't feel like a lot was happening. But then toward the end, like the last 100 pages, like I said, action-packed, a lot of stuff happening, just fight scenes and all of this good stuff. I was so interested in the last 100 pages and the first 100 pages. And then the middle, like this part right here, it wasn't, okay. As for character growth and characters, I do see a lot of characters starting to grow and develop. Nynaeve and Egwene in particular, I think they really had a lot of growth in this book. And then finally Rand. I have mixed feelings about Rand. Sometimes I get annoyed by him very easily. And then other times I root for him so hard. Like, I'm just, Rand, you can do this, push through. But I think he accepts a lot about himself that he was resistant to before. And I'm proud of him for that. And I'm interested to see how he pushes on through the rest of the series. So we shall see. And last but not least, I picked up a new series that I am behind. I am very behind on the hype train for this, The Cruel Prince. I think I was hesitant to pick this up because I've been reading so much adult high fantasy that I was scared I was going to be bored with this. I wasn't bored with it per se. I just felt that it was a little bit cringy at times. The dialogue, the relationships, some of the characters were a little bit dull. I had a good time reading it. There were fun parts to this, and I can see why a lot of people are like really interested in this series, and I will be continuing. I actually did start The Wicked King, so I will be continuing the series because I heard The Wicked King is better. So I'm hoping that is true. However, I did predict the ending, and the relationship that comes up, or the romantic relationship that comes up in here later on in the book, was a little weird. Like, it was not built upon. I feel it was kind of insta-lovey, you know what I mean? And it seemed like a relationship of convenience for me almost. So I'm probably going to get some hateful comments about my opinions for this book. But I don't know. That's what I felt about it. And I'm hoping that I'll like The Wicked King more than this. I do, however, appreciate that the protagonist in this book is an outsider in her own world, and she is trying really hard to be a part of it. I also do appreciate that she is a flawed character. She is unlikable at times. She's selfish. She's ambitious. We're not always meant to look at her and say, wow, she's so cool and can fight with swords and I want to be her. Like, I feel like that's a lot of what we get with YA fantasy sometimes, but that's not all that we get from this protagonist. So I will say that was pretty interesting. So I'm going to continue on with this and we'll see how it goes. So that is my January wrap up. I am so excited to continue with February. I'll have a video showing you my February TBR coming up pretty soon. Just let me know if you've read these books and your thoughts on them, and we can chat, and I'll try to respond in the comments as much as I possibly can. I'm excited to be here, guys. I'm excited to talk books and make friends and just have a great time with you guys. So see you next time. Cheers.